Okay, in this session of Genesis, we will continue dealing with chapter 1, verse 1. I am now on slide in your PowerPoint. I've jumped to slide 64, where we have God, not Yahweh, but Elohim. Everything prior to that deals with arguments for the existence of God, and you have an upcoming paper on that subject. So by all means, look at those. Look at the textbook and quote the lectures that were sent prior on Populi. Okay, so real quick, notice that the Bible does not begin by proving that God exists, as we did earlier in our study, but it rather assumes his existence. We see the same presupposition in John 1. You know, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and then, of course, the Word, the Logos, became flesh in verse 14 of chapter 1 of John. Goes hand in hand with Genesis. Okay, now, what about slide 64? God. Elohim is the Hebrew equivalent for the English word deity or deity. Elohim represents the concept of what we call a plural majesty due to its plural form. But that does not mean polytheism, many gods or plural gods. Many commentators seek to argue that because the word Elohim is used, therefore it's evident that the idea of a triune concept of God is right there. We have the Trinity right here, because Elohim is plurality of the name God. So I think that is not the strongest version, for sure, to argue Trinity that early in Genesis. The plural Elohim in combination with the verb created is common throughout the Old Testament, and it certainly doesn't refer to any plurality of beings whatsoever. It is a monotheistic term referring to a plural majesty, not triunity. Now, Judaic monotheism clearly affirms one God belief, as the Shema, S-H-E-M-A, the Shema declares, the Lord, the God of Israel, is one. That's in Deuteronomy 6:4, very popular passage even today in Jerusalem. Elohim signifies the creator of the universe as strong and mighty, from antiquity all the way up to modernity, and I'm going to say even the postmodern era. The Hebrew word for God is richer than other languages. So we have to be careful there in how languages break down. The word God in English certainly does not do justice to the word Elohim. Some speculate, again, that the use of the plurality of Elohim indicates persons within the oneness of God. I already gave you my thoughts on that. But in a nutshell, one way to think about the Trinity is ontologically. Ontology refers to the study of being. You know, what is a being? What's a human being? What's a divine being? What's an angelic being? And so on. So when we say ontologically, we're referring to the divine nature of God. Ontologically, there's one what, the divine nature, that consists of three whoms, or three persons. So there's one what and three whoms. Think of a triangle. You draw a triangle. Put Father at the top peak, Son, and then Holy Spirit. Is the Father the top corner, the bottom corner to the right? Or is the right corner the left corner? No. There's only one triangle, one whatness ontologically, but the triangle consists of three whoms. Just to, you know, analogies have their breaking point. That's why they're called analogies. But that is a simple way to explain the Trinity. I don't think you can go with the analogy of the egg or water. You know, vapor, liquid, and ice, or say the egg. You got the yolk, you got the shell, you got the white. Those are completely three different components that make up the egg. So we have to remember that the triune God, they're all co-equal in their essence, a difference in function. That's about it, as far as we know. All right, let's move on. I'm not going to go through atheism, monotheism anymore, because you can do that on your own. But creation myths On slide 71, that's interesting. In ancient India, the world rests on the back of giant elephants. The ancient Greeks, the earth is held up on the biceps and shoulders of the Atlas. You've seen that, carrying the Atlas on his back. The South Sea Islanders, the earth rests on giant tortoises. And evolution, of course, the universe is the byproduct of mere chance. The cosmos and all in it are the result of random, accidental, unguided causes. So there you have a contrast to Genesis 1. Now, what about verse 2, where we have the words formless and void, or formless and empty, or empty? These pairing words are only found in Genesis, this particular verse, 1:2, and Jeremiah 4:23, and Isaiah 34, verse 11. Although in Jeremiah and Isaiah, these descriptions refer to divine judgment, not creating something out of nothing, ex nihilo creation, that is. Now, the Spirit of God hovered over the deep. Very interesting verse, very interesting verbiage. Some have speculated that deep here somehow is connected to the Akkadian goddess of chaos. And you could spell her name Tiamat, T-I-A-M-A-T. Water, on the other hand, represents the Word. When the Word is preached and shared, the Spirit moves. Why is this argued? Because it's assumed that the word deep implies chaos, now going back to the Akkadian goddess, due to it being formless. But it simply doesn't. That's a stretch. The deep is rather an impersonal mass that covered the world before God brought about the created order. You can find that in L. Wills Baker. Hamilton penned those down. And then we have in verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Question, how could there be light before God created the sun in verse 14? Of course, the skeptics will argue that. God said that let there be light in verse 3, and then in verse 14, he creates the sun. How can we reconcile that Bible difficulty? Now, here's a few answers. Besides sunlight, there are other sources of light in the universe. Remember also that God is light, and he dwells in unapproachable light. Some scholars also hold that the sun was created. Some believe this. I haven't made up my mind yet, but some scholars hold that the sun was created on the first day, but only became visible on the fourth day, as the mist, if you will, cleared. Just like we can't see the sun today on a cloudy day, you can see that in Geisler, Bible Difficulties, page 30. He deals with that. What about contradiction and error? When the Bible and science seem to conflict, you got to remember this, theologians, they make mistakes, as do scientists, but the Bible does not err. About a few general principles to keep in mind when it comes to Bible and science is, number one, we are now on page 76 in our PowerPoint. The facts of Genesis and the facts of science do not conflict nor contradict. So keep that in mind. Science is a progressive field, and we stand to be corrected, as do theologians and philosophers all the time. But the facts of Genesis and the facts of science do not conflict nor contradict. We just have to dig a little further. Having said that, what does differing interpretations of Genesis and the so-called facts of science say? What are they? Again, point 3, theologians and philosophers, scientists, they err. The scriptures do not err. So if God created the world, the world, which would include natural law, scientific laws, not scientific theories that are dreamt up by the scientists, seeking to, aim at truth, if you will. Now, if God revealed in his word, the scriptures, they can't contradict, because he's the author of scripture and he's the author of creation. So they can't contradict at all. There is a reconciliation somewhere between the two extremes. So lots of good books on the subject, Bible and science, that you can Google. Just make sure that you trust the author. What else? Slide 77. As demonstrated throughout history, scientific theories do change. So when these contradictions or alleged contradictions appear it's important to remember that scientific theories can change and human beings can make mistakes. And repeatedly, science has been catching up with the Bible. For example, we talked about cosmology early on. What about archaeology? The old German theologians, or even some in Britain, saying, we read here in the scriptures, we read about the Canaanites, the Amalekites, the Hittites, for example, and there's no archaeological support whatsoever for these groups, and then they uncover the entire city of Ur. They question that Abraham came from Ur. They find Hittite temples, and so forth. And so finally, science, as far as archaeology goes, catches up with the Bible. All those who claim that the universe has been eternal, always been here, always will, I think that's a problem again because of Big Bang cosmology. So finally, Genesis 1:1 always said the universe had a beginning point, and now scientists are leaning towards the idea, of course, those that I believe are objective. Look, the universe had a beginning point, just like the scriptures say. Interestingly, I've read that there's quite a bit of astronomers who are becoming deists, not necessarily theists, but deists. Now, deism is the idea that there's a being out there. He created the universe and sort of checked out. He's an absent landlord. That would be deism. He doesn't listen to prayer. It would be the god of the Sadducees in the New Testament times. So there we have that information. Again, we are now moving on to slide 78. While it is true that only one interpretation of the early chapters in Genesis are true, many interpretations today may be wrong. We have to keep that in mind. The same is true, again, of scientific, philosophical inquiry, theories in general, and other speculation. So I always say, take it with a sack of salt. Take it with a sack of salt, especially when people are coming up with something that's new, something new and interesting, and it sort of like tickles the ears. It sounds very strange, but, this one guy has really figured it all out. Stay away. Read them, but be careful. A lot of that stuff is just whistleblowing, and we can't have whistleblowing in theology. It's not safe. All right, day one. We are now on 79. As we discovered earlier, the universe had a beginning. Thus, the scriptures, Genesis 1:1, agrees on that point with modern astronomy. Geology also affirms the scriptures in that A, the universe came first, B, the world was second, C, then sea life, D, then lower life forms, E, then mankind. And there's only one race, by the way. When blacks, Asians, Mexicans, whites, whatever, refer to, well, my race would never do that. We need to forget about that. There's only one human race. We were all created equal in his image. One human race, humanity. While we have different ethnic groups, it's incorrect to say my race is brown, black, or white. We are one race, period, created equal, and there's no distinction at the foot of the cross whatsoever. Number 3, physics indicates that the world is running out of usable energy, referring to the second law, thermodynamics. Interestingly, again, if the universe was infinite or eternal, it would have ran out of that usable energy an infinity ago. Yet here we are, studying this information. I think it was Al-Ghazali, a Muslim mystic philosopher, who said he's referring to causal events in the past, like every effect has a cause, and behind that effect there's a cause. Could you do that for infinity? Could you go back in time with just endless causes and effects? We call that infinite regress back in time. And I don't think so, because like Ghazali said, he says, if the series of events, referring to cause and effect, if the series of events in the past are actually infinite, the present moment couldn't come to arrive. Yet here we are, unquote. Very good stuff. That's a philosophical argument for the beginning of the universe, and one of the proof texts, if you will, for the Kalam, cosmological argument. All right, what about mathematics? Math shows that the universe shows that if the universe was an accidental byproduct of chance, if that were the case, that number would be so astronomically unlikely that you might as well maintain theism. It's like, whatever, 10 to the 50th power and some. I don't have the data in front of me, but you might as well. It's sort of like this. The fact that this universe permits life, we're going to call that life permitting versus life prohibiting. So if the universe is just the result of mere chance, from goo to zoo to you, came from nothing, by nothing, or whatnot, lower life forms now turning into you, and just coming from a non-thinking agent, not only would the effect, us, be greater than our costs, which doesn't square with science. The effect is never greater than its costs. It might be equal to it or less. So every effect has a cost. Now, about this universe being life permitting versus life prohibiting, the odds for the universe to be intact like it is, with all of nature's laws and the fine-tuning of the universe, Jupiter, our giant vacuum machine that sucks up space dust before it hits the earth, the moon being positioned exactly where it is in order for our bodies not to be ripped into pieces, producing gravity. The sun being exactly where it is, shrinking 5 feet per hour, just like it needs to be, and all these other fine-tuning characteristics. There are hundreds of these. It's almost like playing a harp. If one of those strings were not in tune, the whole thing would just collapse. This would not be a life-permitting universe. So if accidents brought us here, this world ought to be, it should have been a life-prohibiting world. So when you look at these arguments from intelligent design and astrophysics produced by Christian scientists, I'm referring to, Hugh Ross is one example. I would be careful with some of his speculations. He's not a theologian, but when it comes to his discoveries or promoting other people's discoveries, his fine-tuning of the universe along with Michael Behe in biology and the rest of them make a strong case. So mathematically, I think you might as well just become a theist if you're going to maintain that we came from chance. That number is just ridiculous. The probability for us to be here today from chance. Finally, humanity reproduces after its own kind, just like Genesis declares. Let each kind produce after their own kind, not from one kind to another, or one kind mating with another, producing another kind. So, in that sense, I would say anthropologically, the study of anthropology is right on target with Genesis. All right. Concerning the word light throughout the Bible, Genesis 1, verses 4 and 5. God did not call the darkness good. That's something you need to pay attention to. When God created the light, it separated the darkness, and God calls the light good. In Revelation, John records that when it all comes to an end, darkness shall be no more. And that's in Revelation chapter 21, verse 23. And you Bible students, never say the book of Revelations. It's not plural for revelations. It's one revelation. You always say revelation, the book of Revelation, not plural. So that's in chapter 21, verse 23. God sent the second person of the Trinity, his divine Son, to be the light of the world. We're also told that we too ought to shine our lives before a dying world. You don't hide a lantern and put it on the hilltops. Hide it. You put it on top of the mountain, on hilltops, so everyone can see it. So we too ought to shine in that way. According to some, the word lights, in plurality, in this verse represents signs making periods of time. The light was called day, and darkness was called night. Then it was morning and the first day. Slide 81, day 2, verses 6 through 8. You have the word expanse. In the Latin is firmamentum. Very interesting verse here. There seems to have been a water canopy above the oceans in the original creation of the world. And this expands firmamentum, we read that it separated these waters. This stretched out heavenlies could be compared to something that's being hammered out, if you will. Now, if you were to draw a circle and you read these verses, where God said, let there be an expanse, or a space, or a firmament, or an emptiness separating the waters from the waters above. What is he talking about? What's Moses talking about? We know that planet Earth is a watery planet, so we have oceans within it. But if we were to place an expanse within the Earth, that simply wouldn't work, right? So what some commentators are arguing is that you have the original crust of the Earth here, the planet, not the crust, the planet. And then you would have outside of it a layer, H2O, a water canopy protecting the Earth. So between the water canopy, and like Job says, the Earth is suspended on nothing, right, in space, you have, it's sort of like taking a tennis ball inside of a giant balloon. Between the perimeter of the balloon and the perimeter of the tennis ball, you would have that expanse. If that's the case, you would have a protective water layer that would have shielded and protected man from harmful ultraviolet sun rays. And of course, that's the #1 cause of death. Yeah, it's good to be in the sun for a certain amount of time, get your vitamin D, but if you're frying in the sun 24/7, you will get cancer. It's the #1 killer that we know of today. So the sun is our friend, but it's also our enemy. Do all things in moderation. Now, having said that, if the sun rays were to hit that outer canopy, I'm talking now pre-flood, before Noah's time, it would filter out the ultraviolet rays somewhat, right? So you'd have the sunbeams coming through the outer canopy, being filtered, and then going through the expanse, bouncing off the oceans, back and forth within the canopy now. That would create a global tropical atmosphere, which would, well, I'm speculating, it could explain why the dinosaurs were so huge. It could explain why we have asparagus trees in the fossil record up to 80 feet tall. Today, you're lucky if you could grow one in a greenhouse up to 6 feet. It would explain why mammoths were so huge, and even why some of the people prior to Noah lived so long. I mean, you have Adam at 950, I believe, if I'm correct. Noah at 550. Methuselah, the oldest guy in the Bible, at 969. And then right after the fall, I mean, not the fall of man, right after Noah's flood, you just notice that the years starts to drop. Very interesting. So when we get to the flood, you will recall here that the fountains of the deep were open and the windows of heaven were open. I don't think it was just normal rain. I believe that canopy actually collapsed, which would create an upthrust of mountains and everything else. But that's a study. We will cover some of that stuff later. Moving on to slide 80, where are we now? On 82, he divided the waters. Again, upper level of water may also refer to moisture. Regardless of this mysterious or kind of strange verbiage, the fact that water comes in liquid, solid, and vapor, Genesis is sound and true in its descriptive language. Day 3, this is where the dry land of continents begin to appear, as the waters from above are separated from the oceans below. Now, while there's only one global ocean, keep this in mind, there's only one global ocean, the seas are geographically divided into the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Arctic, and the Southern Oceans. And the source there is National Ocean Services. But really, there's only one global ocean, but we name it the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Arctic, etc. It's interesting to keep in mind that since this occurs before the shifting of the Earth's plates, which are plate tectonics, you know, the continents moving around on lava, I believe that resulted also from the flood that we will get to in Genesis chapter 7. All land seemed to have been solid at this point. Okay, we have verses 11, 12, and 13. This refers to all plants and vegetation, seed and kind, reproducing after its kind, demonstrates the reliability of Genesis of botanic descriptions. These will continue to reproduce after their own kind. as the world now continues to move forward. Notice that it is one thing to create plant life. It's another thing to cause them to reproduce after their kind. So not only did he create them, he gave them the inherent capacity to actually reproduce. Those are two different things, and they're very interesting things. Just shows his omnipotence and his brilliance at work. Number one requires the task of creating, to create plant life, while number two requires the task of motion for it to continue, which we call teleology or teleonomy. You can look at the teleological argument for the existence of God, and you'll get the idea of what we're talking about. Both require design resulting from intelligent design and a mover being able to move them forward, hence a personal creator and designer. We will, in our next session, pick up at day 4, and we will go very, very fast. So you will get multiple videos sent to you all at once. Watch them as you see fit. Just try to get through it before we're done. All right. Blessings to you. Email me if you have any questions. Good luck. Bye-bye.